Hello, my name is Rob, and today I'm going to rank every book I read in 2024. Hello and welcome to Rob's Randoms, a channel where I make videos about things that interest me, and I try to read 12 books every year. I try and read one book per month. I post on my Instagram, @OverEdgeKid, if you're interested, and today we're going to rank every book I read this year. So today we're going to go through each of the books I read this year, from the 12th most enjoyed to my first most enjoyed. I'm going to tell you basically what the plot is about without any spoilers, and then I'm going to go into more details about what I enjoyed and didn't enjoy about each of the books. So if you were interested from the first initial bit, you don't have to have spoilers for the entire book before you go off and read it. So let's begin and talk about my 12th favourite book of this year, and that is Occupy by Noam Chomsky. So this book is a collection of transcripts of interviews and talks that Noam Chomsky did about the Occupy movement when it was happening. So, the Occupy movement no longer really exists. I understand it had some, infighting at the time, and also just the media was against them, and they just kind of faded away. But while it was around, the Occupy movement was huge and massive, and did have a big impact on pop culture. It was a really interesting read, and there are some really good nuggets of information and wisdom throughout the book. The book also ends with advice of what to do if you get arrested while protesting. It's very specific to America, but it is very good advice in general. So I'm putting this 12th on my list, not because it was a bad book, but because this is more about me reading novels for entertainment. This is a very short, small book, and it's about politics, and the set of politics at the minute just depresses me, and reading more about this kind of thing did not help. So it's a very good book, very interesting book. It just wasn't very fun for me. Next up is Berserker. This is Adrian Edmondson's autobiography. So this is the autobiography of Adrian Edmondson, a well-known actor who is most known for his work with Rick Mayall on things like The Young Ones and Bottom. I am a big Adrian Edmondson fan. I loved all of his work on things like The Young Ones and Bottom and Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, so I was fascinated to read this. There is a lot of stuff about him growing up in a boarding school, about trying to escape and stuff, and how he got into acting, and his work with all of the other alternative comedians in the 80s, working on Comic Strip Presents, things like that. It was fascinating and an interesting read. The reason that it's slightly low down is because he's quite a negative thing about when he talks about Rick Mayall. They were best friends for a long time, but it starts to read in the book that Adrian Edmondson just kind of started to resent him at the end, because Rick Mayall had a quad bike accident, and it gave him some issues with memory and stuff. And it just seems that their relationship soured at the end, and that's all that he tends to write about. And it was really sad. It was an interesting look into this life of this person that I really like his work, but it was just really sad in places. And again, it was a biography, it was non-fiction, and I more prefer fiction. Again, it just wasn't as fun as these other ones, you know? Next up on the list, the 9th best book I read this year was Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. Where is it? Might be that one right there. This book is a surreal and visceral, horrible story about a city. It's all about drugs and sex and depravity, and it's told in a very strange style. It's weird. William S. Burroughs was part of the kind of proto-beatnik generation, and so his writing has a very specific style, which is to say that it never makes any sense. However, there is a flow to his writing style that I just happen to really enjoy. So let me try and find you just a random passage and we'll see what we think. It took 2 hours for the reptile to raise 3 pink transparent fingers covered with black fuzz. Several meat eaters lay in vomit, too weak to move. The black meat is like a tainted cheese, overpoweringly delicious and nauseating, so the eaters eat and vomit and eat again until they fall exhausted. A painted youth slithered in and seized one of the great black claws, sending the sweet, sick smell curling through the cafe. The whole book is like that. So the book is about a detective in a city looking for clues to a crime, but frankly, I had to look that up on Wikipedia afterwards because I didn't follow anything in the book. Basically, there's a few really good phrases, and all of it is basically a metaphor for being a heroin addict or just a drug addict in general. And so I enjoyed bits of it, and I enjoyed the flow, but I didn't take in the story whatsoever. Maybe I need to read this again in a few years and see if I like it a bit more. But the thing is, there aren't that many people writing like William S. Burroughs did, so I appreciate that he is one of the few people who writes so differently, and I like that. Okay, I'll level with you. I'm recording this after everything else because I forgot there was another book here, and I got kind of messed up with the numbers anyway, so I'm decided to put this wherever I put it in the video. So this is On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan. A newlywed couple is at the hotel on their honeymoon night, and they try to consummate their marriage, and it doesn't go very well. So I thought the book was going to be just that. I thought it was going to take place entirely within the hotel suite, and they argue and kind of resolve it and that kind of thing. But that's not what happens. We then kind of get a flashback of both of their lives up to this point. We kind of explain how they met, like what their relationship has been like, and it's a bit strange. There's a lot of things in this that I didn't really know why it was in there. His mum turns out to have brain damage, and I don't know why we needed to know that. Then they are in the hotel room and they try to consummate the marriage, and the guy desperately wants to have sex, and he thinks that it is right as a husband to get sex from his wife on their honeymoon. And the wife is quite clearly asexual, but doesn't have the language to explain that, and she just doesn't want sex. There are several scenes in that room where it's very uncomfortable, but there is a moment where they are making out because she thinks it's the right thing to do, and he is going for it, and she desperately wants him to stop, and it so reads as a sexual assault scene, and it is so uncomfortable. I hated it. It was so visceral, and I did not enjoy it. So I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the writing, aside from the essay scenes, but it's just such a depressing book that I'm putting it low down on the list. Basically, wherever it is I've decided to put this book, that's where it is. So now let's move on to the next number in this list. Next up, number 9 on our list is Dead Men's Trousers. Whoopsie doodles. This is another sequel to Trainspotting. I think it's the last sequel to Trainspotting. I think the story is finished now. And basically, we see where all the characters end up about 10 or 15 years down the line. Yes, this is all the characters in Trainspotting, again, kind of meeting up a little bit later in life. They've all gone off and done other things, and it is very interesting to see where everybody ended up. Renton becomes a relatively successful DJ manager. Sick Boy is a sex and drug addict. Spud ends up homeless or begging on the street. And Begbie, in probably the least believable thing, becomes a world-renowned artist. The book is pretty good, and it's still all the same characters, and I like them all. It's just everything in the book is a little bit too extreme now. It's becoming a little bit cartoony. We're in the spoilers bit now, but there is a bit where Sick Boy ends up taking out somebody's appendix in a sewer in Paris, and it works. So, like, that's the kind of level you have to be accepting of to read the book and enjoy it. Another spoiler, Spud dies, which is horribly sad, and that's why this isn't getting higher up on the list. Next up, number 8 on our list is The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. So this is the third, I believe, in his Thursday Murder Club series. It involves crime lords, death, and lots of cups of tea. Although this is the first book in the series I read, it was easy to follow. I did quite enjoy it. It's easy reading. I read it on holiday, and it's that kind of book. The plot was interesting, although it promises a lot of action and excitement and doesn't really deliver on them. So we're in the spoiler section now. So there is a Russian gang lord who is built up to be very scary and menacing, but then we meet him and he's just a frail old man who just wants some company. So it was a fine book. I enjoyed it, but I'm probably not going to rush back to read all the other books in the series. Next up, number 7 on our list is Last Human by Doug Naylor. This is an adventure in deep space featuring genetically engineered life forms, virtual hells, and an entity known as the Rage. So Grant and Naylor wrote the TV show Red Dwarf together, and they wrote the novels of it together as well, but they had a bit of a falling out, and so the novels where they wrote together ended with the last book to this, which was called Better Than Life. After that, they both continued writing novels for Red Dwarf, but basically split the canon off in 2 different directions. So this is Doug Naylor's first book since they kind of split up, and it was pretty good, even though about half of the book is just quotes from the show. Like, it's a separate story, but then they reuse quotes from the show, and I kind of go, I know that joke, that's used in the show. Like, I want to read this book for something better than that. So Lister goes to prison for something horrible that he did after he thinks he's going to get away with it. It's a great scene, and he has his own virtual personal hell that is basically everything he hates and would be awful. That is his prison sentence, to live there for however long. It's really interesting. And then we find out that he's not the real Lister. He is like an alternative universe Lister, and he's evil. And then he meets up with the rest of the crew, and shenanigans happen. It was an interesting book, and I did enjoy it, even if there is just a lot of reused quotes from the show in it. And that's why it gets whatever number slot I'm saying this is. Number 6 on our list is Cause for Alarm by Eric Ambler. So this story is about a man who ends up working in Italy just before the breakout of World War II. This was a really good spy thriller, and it was especially interesting because it was written before World War II happened. So you get to see and hear about all the drama that's happening in like other countries, and they know something's going to happen, but they don't know what yet. It was really cool. And also, I just love reading old books like this to kind of hear it from the language they were speaking at the time. There's lots of different idioms there that like we don't use anymore, and I love reading stuff like that. Anyway, really good spy thriller. Enjoyed it a lot. Would recommend it. Number 5 is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. A boy befriends a grumpy, grumbling old man and his dog, but things take a turn when he discovers what's hidden in the man's shed. It's been said before that Stephen King writes really good worlds and characters and stories, but that it always falls apart at the ending. They kind of come out of nowhere. In this book, the ending change kind of happens at the halfway point. So the beginning bit is boy befriends old man and his dog. Old man is very grumpy and grumbly, and the child has lost his mother. So they're kind of forming a bit of a friendship. It's really good. Then he goes into the shed and discovers that it's a portal to another world that is kind of like a fairy tale. And it becomes this entirely different book that I still enjoyed, but for different reasons. And I kind of wished it had just stayed in the real world because it was a really good plot. It was interesting, although fantasy just isn't my kind of thing. And the ending, he goes back to the real world, and it's been about 4 months since he left in their time. And the book just kind of goes, yeah, everyone just kind of accepted that and then move on, which is Stephen King struggling to write an ending, basically. Number 3, my third favourite book of the year, was The Twilight Zone by Rod Serling. This is a series of 23 short stories ranging from sci-fi to fantasy to horror. So I love Rod Serling, I love The Twilight Zone, I was going to love this book. It's 23 short stories by Rod Serling that some of them were episodes and then they've kind of been changed into this. Some of them just later on became episodes and they are very similar to what's in the book. But most of the stories were really good. There was a few that were a bit too long and maybe a bit dull for me, but there was some really good stuff in here. And again, it's written a long time ago. So again, there's lots of like old idioms or ways of speaking that we don't have anymore. And I just love reading that kind of stuff. Anyway, I really loved it. I love The Twilight Zone. If you love The Twilight Zone, you're going to love that. 2 books left. Which one is going to be my favourite book of the year? Well, my second favourite book of the year is The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. A woman moves into a new neighbourhood to discover that all of the other housewives are the most stereotypical 1950s housewives ever. They all just spend their entire days cleaning the house and cooking and having no opinions of their own, just waiting for their husbands to come back. And it becomes this kind of conspiracy thriller book as she tries to work out what is the issue. And I mean, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the book. It's really good, but it is a little bit cheesy and weird. It's kind of a short book as well. I would have loved a bit more world building, a little bit more time with other characters. But I mean, the point of the book is the feminist message that it's trying to convey. And it is as relevant now as it was back when it was written, which is very sad. Anyway, it's a really good book though. And that means that my favourite book of 2024 was another Stephen King book. This is The Long Walk. Although this is him writing as Richard Bachman, not Stephen King, if that counts. This is the story of 100 teenage boys who sign up to be part of an event where they have to walk a steady pace for as long as they can. I am a massive Stephen King fan. I don't know if you can see my shelf up there of all of my Stephen King books. But yeah, this is a Richard Bachman book, which I think is why I missed it for so long. But I picked it up and I didn't realise this was the 45th anniversary. I thought this was a new book. But actually, this book is even older than 45th. This was the first book that Stephen King ever wrote back when he was at college. So although Carrie is the first book he had published, he wrote this first, but it didn't get published until a lot later. So yes, this is the story of 100 kids who sign up to be part of a event where they have to walk at a steady pace for as long as they can. As soon as they stop or their pace doesn't match what they're supposed to, they get shot, they get killed. I can't explain why I loved it so much. It's a very vague book. It doesn't explain the backstory of basically anything. I think it's written to be analysed. So I read online afterwards kind of some analysis of it, and a lot of people say, well, the walk is just, it's a metaphor for life. You keep walking, and then if you stop walking, you die, and all the small interactions that the main character has with other characters, that's a metaphor for life, which I kind of accepted, but I was like, that's a bit dull. But then I realised that he was writing this during the Vietnam War. And I think the book is supposed to be a metaphor for signing up to the military during war. So you sign up with vague ideas of glory for when you come back, and then you're in it. And then if you stop, you die. You basically keep going until you die. unless you happen to be lucky enough to get to go home. Anyway, it's a fantastic book. It is well worth the read, and it's so good to analyze afterwards to kind of go, what did all of these individual aspects mean? But on its own, the story is brilliant. You like all of the characters. When the characters die, you are devastated. This was a great book. This is absolutely my favorite book of 2024. So that was every book I read in 2024. This was very fun. Hopefully I will read another 12 books next year, and we will do this video again next year. I'm looking forward to it already. Have you read any of these books? Let me know in the comments what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching. Click like and subscribe. It really would help me out. My name is Rob, and I'll see you in another random video very soon.